Prime Minister Gordon today, calling for a new world order to tackle our global economic crisis. President Obama said globalization can be an enormous force for good.
2 billion of us exist on less than $2 a day. It makes sense to get rid of people. So what they said, they're going to make godlike decisions on who lives and who dies.
Swine flu breeds in pigs, spreads then from person to person. It's infected 8 people in this country, 1,000 people in Mexico.
There is a global meltdown coming. It is a global depression, and one world currency and one world financial system is the end game.
Cities across the American Southwest are on alert, and just now the Associated Press moved a bulletin saying that 75 students at a high school here in New York City have now fallen ill with flu-like symptoms and are being tested for swine flu.
Go ahead.
We have a very great problem in this country today, and I wonder if you would use your leadership to counteract the rumors, the rumor-mongers that are abroad in the land who are spreading all these rumors and scaring people to death. Large segments of our citizens believe that the United Nations is taking over whole blocks of counties in Kentucky and Tennessee.
Yeah.
And some of them, they believe that we're in a concentration camp and they're going to give our army to Russia and all that baloney.
The issue is
there's a need for a new world order.
It's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
It is a big idea, a new world order.
China said last week they want one global currency. France said yesterday or the day before that they want one world order, a new world order, at the end of this event. 2 nights ago, the government used $900 billion of your money to give loans to businesses and guarantee those loans. They even asked
hearing a great deal from our members about
a big part of this for me is the culture of Wall Street not changing yet with holes in the powers.
It's what it is. They use the TV to program us from a young age.
This is a documentary from which I touch base on one of the most sinister, yet subtle subliminal foundations of messages in which the average person will never come to realize because of the individual's inability to escape their subconscious prison. Now, as you're watching this, please keep in mind that it is perfectly fine with me for you not to interpret this information as truth, but rather as an element of questioning yourself as to why you look at things the way that you do. Now, whether you believe it or not, it is very important for you to understand that there is a big idea that satanically lies within every single piece of data that you come across on an everyday basis. Whether if it's you going out to the movies with your lover, watching music videos in the living room with your friends, reading corporate advertisements on billboards and on the back of buses, or just simply laying back watching some cartoon shows to get a good laugh. The truth of the matter is that 9 times out of 10, you are unknowingly conditioning your subconscious state of mind with everything that you hear and see. In my previous videos, I explained the Luciferian agenda that the global elites are manifesting in plain sight. What's sad about this fact is that the average individual would just quickly brush away the truth in exchange for what would not discomfort their system of belief. Now, this is a topic that is always being looked over as nothing more than the famous conspiracy theory 6-syllable compound word. It is time to expose the mainstream media, music industry, and the New World Order, one world religion, in a way that I hope you understand completely. Since the very beginning of commercialized mainstream media, music, movies, and television shows, there has always been that one deliberate, eye-catching ancient symbol that has always mentally bypassed your full undivided attention when watching these different forms of entertainment, and that one symbol is the all-seeing eye. In case you don't know, and I'm pretty sure that you do, this all-seeing eye was originally crafted by the ancient Egyptians thousands of years before the Babylonian era, used as a symbol of worship to the gods and goddesses such as Osiris, Nimrod, Horus, and so forth. As millenniums passed, this all-seeing eye was gradually adopted by the super global elites, or, in layman's terms, the Illuminati. It is extremely important to understand the subliminal meaning behind this all-seeing eye, but again, it is for you to decide what you undeniably believe is truth and what isn't. With all the intentional distraction of the symbol being transparent more and more as you sit down and watch the mainstream news, music videos, television shows, and movies, the all-seeing eye becomes unnoticeable and irrelevant to what it is you're actually viewing. By this point, you are probably asking yourself, what is the all-seeing eye and its true meaning? The centerpiece of this all-seeing eye is an important Luciferic symbol that lies secretly within Freemasonry and Rosicrucian traditions for the last hundreds of years. This symbol is so vital to the hierarchy of all Freemasons that it has infiltrated its way into every aspect of religion, multi-billion-dollar corporations, computer softwares, film production agencies, mainstream news, video games, clothes, you name it. You are constantly being bombarded with the satanic symbol almost every single day, but are handicapped to distinguish the difference between an honest, simple, and straightforward logo with no subliminal meaning whatsoever as opposed to this one.
Mysterious symbol, which, you've heard all sorts of explanations for it, but I'm going to give you the Masonic Illuminati inner meaning of what this means tonight. And it's going to probably gross you out and astonish you, and I apologize in advance for that. But this is what it means. Crowley reveals the secret behind the all-seeing eye symbol in one of his books, the Book of Thoth, which is a very advanced manual on tarot card readings. And this is the eye of Lucifer.
In the days of Hitler and his rising independent empire, this man desired and tried to enforce a one-world dictatorship, but failed to accomplish his agenda, therefore resulting in the people to prevail. During the time that this was actually taking place, the United States government and United Nations saw this outcome not work proficiently enough and realized that it had to be accomplished through stealth mode. After exhausting every option to do so, mind control came into play. This global mind control came through propaganda, controlling the media and all educational systems, from which turned it around so that the people are in complete, total acquiescence to the point where you are practically begging for your own enslavement. The root of this main problem derives from the massive conditioning of all men, women, and children too busy with work just trying to provide for their families and get by. Since this is a survival mechanism that was created by the same people who made 9/11 happen, people don't have time to look into these matters. This is the exact reason why people would automatically reject just about anything that has anything to do with a conspiracy. People tend to be happy and comfortable in their own comfort bubble. Therefore, when matters like this are expressed and suggested, the unbiased opinion of this matter becomes irrelevant and pointless.
It's on 105th corner, northwest corner, right?
Right.
At number 2 World Trade Center.
Right. Lady is serious in this office. We're not ready to die, but it's getting bad.
I understand, sir. We can get all the apparatus there. I'm trying to let them know where you are.
Oh, please, Larry.
This is 15.
I'm not your call, Peter.
1597.
Let me talk to the caller, Larry.
He's on the line.
Let me talk to him. Where's the fire stuff? There's smoke. Right there. 105, 2 power. All right, sit tight. We'll get through as soon as we can. There's some staying up at the smoke fumes there, man. That's all we can do. What's where you guys up to? We're getting there. Doesn't feel like it, man. I got nothing to. I understand that, sir. We're on the way.
He's on the 105th corner, northwest corner.
Yeah, no problem. Operator?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Okay, we have everything, sir.
I know you do, but it doesn't seem like it. You got lots of people up here.
I understand.
And then you got out in the building, up on the top. Smoke lights, you see the roof there, we're on the floor, we're in the window. And then we had to do in green now. Can't see.
Okay. Just try to hang in there. I'm going to stay with you.
Stay here in an air-conditioned building.
What the hell happened? Okay, I'm still here. He's just trying to find a problem, trying to get to you.
Does it feel like it?
Okay, try to calm down so you can conserve your oxygen, okay? Try to...
Thank God the brother in from the left. It's wind there, it's black, it's iron. Does anybody else want to try it in here? These young men, you get them in from all over. Put them in from Jersey, I don't give a Ohio.
Okay, so what's your last name?
Mine's high school. I must have called about a dozen times already. C-O-S-T-R-O-V-E.
Yeah.
My wife thinks I'm all right. I called her and said I was leaving the building. I was fine, and bang.
Well, I want to...
Hold on. Cherry. That Cherry, you said, right? Yeah. That Cherry's next to me. 105. Who's office? John Astro's office.
That's what you said. That's the office.
You're in John Astro's office. O-S-T. A-R-U. A-R-U. Right, that's the office you're in. They still live in here.
O-S-T-A-R-U. Hello?
Hello. We're looking at the financial center. Two three of us, 2 broken windows.
this day and age, the structure of fear has always been manipulated throughout society in order to keep your mind in a constant panic to make sure that you are never to know what really lies behind this curtain of fabricated facts. If you have ever done enough of your own research, you have or will then realize that there has always been a disastrous rise in misplaced power. Most just won't notice that the false flag staged attacks that occurred on 9/11 were nothing more than a pathetic excuse to create the image of an enemy and go to war with the Middle East to take over all of the foreign oil and other natural resources for profit gain, meanwhile robbing away all of your liberties and rights. Your very own freedom is being stolen from right under your nose. It's been almost 8 years since the events took place on September 11th, and where have we gotten? Nowhere. In the midst of this unfortunate dumbing down of society that is becoming more rampant as time goes along, a small percent of people are being woken up from all the lies and deceit in hopes to start raising awareness, but are outweighed by the disinformed public. There are just too many documentaries, testimonies, and digital reenactments as proof to discredit that 9/11 was an inside job, but the signs are all around the world for you to believe otherwise.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
Let's see, depopulation. Yeah, there are some people who would like to reduce the population of the planet. If you go outside the city of Atlanta, go east about 60 or 70 miles to the town of Elberton, and then go north on Highway 77 about 10 miles, you'll find off to the right what's called the Georgia Guidestones. Looks kind of like Stonehenge. There's big, huge granite rocks set up there. This was done by a guy who gave a pseudonym, came in, paid cash, had this company set these things up in 1980, called himself R.C. Christian, but that's not his real name. He says it right on the stones, a pseudonym, false name. On these Georgia Guidestones, it gives the 10 Commandments for the New World Order. 10 Commandments for the New World Order. The first commandment was to maintain humanity under 500 million. I went there and looked at those things and said, oh, hold on a minute. Today's population is 6 billion. They want to maintain humanity under 1/2 billion. Looks like a lot of people got to die for their plan to work, which is, by the way, the plan. As Jacques Cousteau said, we'd have to eliminate 350,000 people a day. 1/3 of a billion people a day would have to be eliminated to save Mother Earth. Bill Clinton said we need to reduce the population of the Earth to 1 billion. There are a lot of folks who would like to reduce the population of the Earth. The Bible command is quite the opposite. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the Earth. You know, God said, go fill it, have a bunch of kids. The Bible says He designed it to be inhabited. So no, it's absolutely the opposite of what God wants.
What happened on September 11, 2001 was just the beginning of a U.S. government-conspired attack to bring forth the end of our rights. Throughout the last 100 years, while you were too occupied with work and watching television, an evil system has been manifesting right before your eyes. Death by the billions has long since been the agenda for the global elites. To put things into perspective, you might want to ask yourself, why is it that every disease, large fractions of poverty, famine, and the overall death by the millions is taking place every single day? There is a hidden reason for this purpose and one purpose alone: population control. The Earth is currently inhabited by approximately 6.77 billion people, and with every hour that passes, more than 10,000 people will be born. What you need to know is that the utmost adoration and love for living life itself to the fullest lies in the hands of those who dwell in the shadows of global decision making. Every disease known to mankind, with an exception to the ones that are genetically inherited, are all deliberately ignored for a real cure and replaced with the disguised, slow-paced hidden poison approved by the FDA, in which is commercialized, then stocked over the white counters of all major pharmaceutical companies offering a medical solution to these illnesses, thus resulting in the people to give in, purchase, and take their treatment. There is a win-win situation in all this, and you will reap no benefit whatsoever. What is this reward? It's simple, really. Continue taking the treatment while pharmaceutical corporations take in massive profit through your healthcare provider or your own hard-earned money, and then decline gradual steps in your health until you have reached death. Like I said, you reap no benefit whatsoever. This is just one method that is being implemented to wipe out 90% of mankind. But rather of just focusing on this one pixel from the bigger picture, allow yourself to readjust the clarity of understanding so that you are able to perceive a more in-depth elaboration of this global agenda as a whole.
Let me assure you that absolutely nothing that I'm going to tell you is exaggerated, is interpolated, or is imagined. Everything I'm going to tell you is documented. He who controls food controls the world. Well, they said in 1962, we're going to work toward total global implementation of Codex Alimentarius on December 31st, 2009. They were sort of guidelines. Now, Codex Alimentarius Commission is administered by the World Health Organization, WHO, and the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. They fund Codex and they run it at the request of the UN. So they're mommy and daddy to Codex Alimentarius. In 1994, Codex, with no notice here in this country whatsoever, declared nutrients, put on your intellectual seatbelts, declared nutrients to be toxins. They're poisons. Under Codex, every dairy cow on the planet must be treated with Monsanto's recombinant bovine growth hormone. Furthermore, under Codex, every animal used for food on the planet must be treated with subclinical antibiotics and must be treated with exogenous growth hormones. If you do the numbers in the WHO-FAO projections, the epidemiological projections, they estimate, not I, that just the vitamin and mineral guideline alone, when it goes into global implementation on December 31st, 2009, will result in a minimum of 3 billion, that's B, bad, big, billion deaths. 1 billion through simple starvation. Those folks who die are not particularly economically successful from the point of view of the corporations, but the next 2 billion, they will die from the preventable diseases of undernutrition. Who will live? Probably those people who are wealthy enough and powerful enough to have their own pushers of clean food and nutrients. So we need your help, because the United States leadership is what's going to literally save the population of the planet.
Never heard of Codex? That's exactly what they want. Profit-driven political intrigue, government corruption and coercion, where genetic manipulation and the patenting of life forms are used to gain worldwide control over food production. This is just the tip of the iceberg.
66% of United States residents' public water is fluoridated. It is known to have tremendous effects on bone cancer, joint problems, bone weakness, lowered estrogen and testosterone levels, and dental fluorosis, which is yellowing of the teeth and pitting in the enamel. Wouldn't it make more sense to enhance public water with vitamins which are meant to be ingested to promote overall health, rather than putting such a toxic chemical in our water with a bogus explanation that it will improve our dental health? We now know that fluoride causes more dental problems than it solves. Something doesn't seem right about this. Do you honestly believe that these companies care deeply enough for the people to spend large amounts of their own money to fluoridate public water when the people already purchase their own toothpaste? But there's a difference between toothpaste and drinking water. We don't ingest toothpaste. If you go to any hardware store and look at any rat poison product, you will only find one ingredient: sodium fluoride. It is the most toxic ionic molecule outside of potassium dichromate. Now Dannon, along with other companies, have begun fluoridating bottled water. It is becoming increasingly difficult to get away from. And the fact that fluoride is also used in many prescription antidepressants shows that it eliminates aggression and motivation in people.
fluoride, to my knowledge as a physician, has absolutely no biological benefit whatsoever.
But one of the significant things is that the Russians carried out all sorts of experiments on the people living in the Gulag. One of them, of course, was to fluoridate the water. Why? You fluoridate the water, why people are not as aggressive as they ordinarily would be. In fact, what is the active ingredient in Prozac that is so widely distributed in America today? Well, it's a fluoride compound.
And now, we are finding that public water nationwide is showing up with arsenic, lead, cadmium, and thermonium, which is a radioactive form of lead. Cancer, lowered sex drive, birth defects, sedation, and brain defects. Does this not sound like a wonder drug for anyone aiming to control a population?
It's quite astonishing, Paul, the degree to which environmentalists have not been educated about fluoride. You know, people have an unconscious trust in their doctor or their dentist, and if you can persuade doctors and dentists that fluoride is safe and good, then you're able to reach the rest of the nation. People believe their doctors and dentists, and that was a way of promoting fluoride for Bernays. Fluoride was killing their cattle, destroying their crops. Fluoride given to rats had produced bone cancer and liver cancer, and that those results had been doctored to make it look as though fluoride hadn't caused as much cancer.
The pattern that we saw, it typically is what we see with other neurotoxic agents that are well known to cause a hypoactivity or a memory problem or an IQ problem. When I first presented the results of these studies, one of the individuals sitting and listening to the results, he says, "Do you have any idea what you're saying?" And he says, "You're telling us that we're reducing the IQ of children." And basically I said, yes.
Aspartame, the artificial sweetener found in almost every low-sugar or sugar-free product on the market.
First of all, aspartame is made up of three things: methanol, which of course is what produces blindness, aspartic acid, and phenylalanine. These are all poisons. Aspartic acid, of course, produces brain lesions. This was known back in the early 1970s. Methanol produces blindness. Phenylalanine is what you see certainly in the brain, and in high dosage it produces trauma.
We're not making this all up. The FDA did publish back in, I think it was in the 80s, they did publish the 92 potential side effects of aspartame. And they do, these side effects are quite, are extremely serious. Things like dizziness, problems with balance, abdominal pain and cramps, changes in vision, seizures and convulsions, etc., etc.
Yet despite all of these harmful effects, Donald Rumsfeld pushed it out into the stores in over 5,000 products when he was CEO of Searly, the company that manufactured aspartame.
The sustainable goal is the elimination of the middle class. The world cannot support 6 billion people. But you see, the plan behind sustainable development includes population control. It's a program for land use control, education control, and population control. The leaders of the sustainable movement say that the world's human population should not exceed 500 million people. That's a 93% reduction of today's population levels. In 1992, while the Rio conference was going on, George Bush, then president, was there. He was just offshore in Prince Charles's yacht, where he executed the Agenda 21 protocols on behalf of the United States and brought it back to Washington, D.C. Within a year, Bill Clinton, by executive order, established the President's Council for Sustainable Development.
In 1996, Bill Clinton set up the President's Council on Sustainable Development. One of the dictates of Agenda 21 is that every country in the world is to set up a national council to oversee the implementation of Agenda 21. I've listened to Gorbachev explain, we are writing a new set of 10 or 15 commandments to replace the original 10. Which one of the 10 do you think these guys don't like? Thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet. Because I'll tell you what, these people have lied to us. They're in the process of stealing all of this nation's natural resources, and they covet everything you have left.
To explain the map, the red are areas that are to be off limits to human beings. If you live there, you won't. The yellow areas are the areas for major control of all human activity. If you live there, you won't. Black dots are the smart growth zones. That's where human beings are to be stacked and packed in small living units along rail tracks. The Smart Growth Program ultimately has jobs assigned and children cared for by the state.
And in conjunction with Codex Alimentarius, food will be limited and water consumption will be decreased to 10 gallons per day per person. That is over a 90% reduction in people's average daily water consumption. And along with shortages of food and water, the food we will be provided with will be genetically manipulated and nutrient deficient. Genetic manipulation of food causes complications in metabolizing and utilizing food for energy.
In June of 2003, scientists reported that the gene sequence of the inserted genes into crops had actually changed their order. They had re-scrambled. So the genetic inserts are not stable. Another laboratory confirmed this and found that it had changed in the same varieties in different ways that they had tested. So not only is it unstable and changing, it's not even uniform in the way it's changing. This is incredibly dangerous.
Nutrient deficiencies due to Codex's planned vitamin and mineral ban will cause billions of preventable diseases. Both of these will ultimately lead to billions of deaths.
Reach the
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
The only way they can pass this bill is by creating and sustaining a panic atmosphere. That atmosphere is not justified. The only way to pass a bad bill, keep the panic pressure on.
of the government. The Bush administration tells us they have such a plan. They introduced a little sketchy public version that's clearly inadequate.
Many of us were told in private conversations that if we voted against this bill, and a few members were even told that there would be martial law in America if we voted no. That's what I call fear-mongering.
The Security Committee of the United States House of Representatives access to their so-called detailed plan to provide for continuity of government.
Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you not assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster? Mr. Chairman.
I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive and classified area, so may I request that you not touch upon that, sir.
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondering if that was the area in which he had worked. I believe that it was.
May I most respectfully request that that matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, I'm certain arrangements can be made for an executive session.
Just when you thought the spectrum of eliminating the Earth's overpopulation was at its peak, at every turn was society consuming the inescapable poison, food, and drug supply. Once the global elites had staged another false flag attack in America. And yes, I said another false flag attack in America. The mainstream news will then subvertently brainwash the masses into believing that the terrorists were the ones responsible for the mayhem. Once this is in place, they're going to use this tragic event as an excuse to implement martial law, and that is the exact reason why they will do this. What is martial law? Well, from what you have learned in textbooks, mass media, and the internet, it goes a little something like this. Martial law authorizes the military to act vigorously for the maintenance of an orderly civil government. It is the exercise of the power which resides in the executive branch of the government to preserve order and ensure the public safety. It is the law of necessity to be prescribed and administered by the executive power. Its object, the preservation of the public safety and good order, defines the scope, which will vary with the circumstances and necessities of the case. Many bills have been passed through legislation should martial law ever be declared, but what you don't know is that H.R. 1955 and Rex 84 are bills from which were passed through Congress with the intention of marrying these two bills together, then having them on standby until the state's attacks take place, inevitably provoking martial law to be declared with the stroke of a presidential pen. So what is martial law? Martial law is the limitless enforcement of all military personnel, including infantry, Marines, SWAT teams, and police, to crowd up in every street in the United States, guarding every corner of every block with fully armed soldiers at every turn, observing your every move to make sure that you comply with the sick regulations of Homeland Security, ensuring that you never get out of line with the government. Curfews before dark will be imposed to every citizen in conjunction with every person obligated to spy on their own neighbors and report anything suspicious to standby authorities. But the reality of this totalitarian scheme coincides with the granddaddy of them all. The FEMA concentration camps. To break down what these concentration camps are exactly, You first need to understand that everything you might have learned about these detention centers up till this point have been whitewashed and distorted so that any individual who attempts to divulge the information regarding this matter will then quickly become subject of ridicule. So again, let us break down the basics of what this tyrannic plan really is. There are 3 color lists from which the US government created along with FEMA as their front runner once martial law has been implemented completely. The 3 cow tagging labels are the red list, the blue list, and last but not least, the yellow list. The red list is solely dedicated to exterminate and kill every and all outspoken patriots, ministers, talk show hosts, community leaders, net leaders, outspoken filmmakers and rappers, government-resistant families, and just about anybody who refuses to go along with the unconstitutional agenda. Every individual who falls in this red list is a threat to the global preparations for the establishment of a new world order, and will therefore result in every person being dragged out of their homes around 4 o'clock in the morning, get sent to the FEMA death camps after being rounded up, and then face execution. Next is the blue list. These people are basically the followers of the red list, but are not as outspoken and independent to seek the truth. These individuals will be rounded up by FEMA after martial law is in full effect, and will then be taken to the concentration camps in an attempt to be re-educated through various mind control methods, but most will not survive this tyrannic procedure. And lastly, we have the yellow list. These are the people who don't have the slightest clue about the New World Order, what it really is, and don't want to know at all. Majority of society falls in this category and are considered to be no threat whatsoever to the agenda, and will therefore be instructed as to how to behave, and will pretty much do whatever they are told. The catch to this matter, though, is that there will be too many of these individuals to be controlled effectively, so many of the rest will be killed or starved to death. But this still does not apparently explain how the detained masses will be murdered, right? Despite the speculation that has arisen about the FEMA trains and its true hidden plan, you should also consider the obvious when you put 2 and 2 together. Hundreds, if not thousands of concentration camps have been built under the FEMA hidden hand all across the United States, based in all remote isolated areas of cities. FEMA bought out vacant warehouses all across the US and spent millions of dollars in renovating old trains, which are mostly Amtrak, remodifying its whole structure to it being 3 levels high. And these trains, along with FEMA railroad barns, are gas-powered, airtight ceiling vents with steel handcuffs at the train seat armrests and steel shackles by the base of the floor for the feet. After the initial second staged attack, all branch of foreign military administered by the United Nations will then begin arresting every US citizen who tries to protest against the government, and will therefore be taken to the FEMA detention centers. Many have confirmed, either through foreign or domestic relations with the insiders of FEMA, that millions upon millions of black plastic coffins have been stationed in all remote areas of cities, from which were manufactured solely for the purpose for the dead bodies to be stored in after the FEMA trains had poisoned all forced boarding passengers that were picked up from the red and blue zones at the concentration camps. Once these trains finally arrive to the FEMA warehouses, with every person exterminated from the train's poisonous gas, all of the dead bodies will be removed from the train carts and then placed inside the plastic coffins. 3 human beings can fit one on top of each other in just one casket liner alone. It is estimated that FEMA will process over 300,000 bodies per hour nationwide once it is in full effect. The remaining select few who have succumbed to this tyrannic government will then be stripped of their individual basic rights and forced to comply, respect, and obey the laws from the global elites, obligated to walk away from our Constitution and never look back. What this really comes down to is the American version of the modern-day Holocaust. Words can't even express how immensely overwhelming it is to even begin divulging this information to you, in which I really don't want it to happen. But one thing that is for certain is that history repeats itself.
Are we trapped here?
The manifestation of a repressive society has put itself into place to aim our indifferences against each other. So with that being said, let's put all the bull to the side and observe the true nature of the real reasons why our own government has been orchestrating these premeditated events at face value. If you take a look back in history, World War I, World War II, and the current war in the Middle East, from which is still in its infancy, were not fought to protect us from the alleged dangerous terrorists, or for the sake of our freedom, oil, nor for the service of our own country, but were staged to rob all of mankind from the freedom of speech, the right to own firearms, the right to grow our own food, the right to have as many children as we wish, the right to express unbiased opinions through alternative forms of media, and to be free as an individual. The people at the top of this capstone have suppressed the secrecy of this massive brainwash, only to really dumb down society into believing and accepting that war is the key in order to sustain our freedom. But nothing could be farther from the truth.
Chairman Ranaki, I'm looking at the report that you handed out this morning, and I was wondering if you could take your copy and turn to page 26. There's a table on page 26 which consists of your balance sheet, and one of the entries on the balance sheet is under assets, central bank liquidity swaps, which shows an increase from the end of 2007 from $24 billion to $553 billion in change at the end of 2008. What's that?
Those are swaps that were done with foreign central banks. Many foreign banks are short dollars, and so they come into our markets looking for dollars and drive up interest rates and create volatility in our markets. What we have done is, with a number of major central banks, like European Central Bank, for example, we swap our currency, dollars, for their currency, euros. They take the dollars, lend it out to the banks in their jurisdiction. That helps bring down interest rates in the global market for dollars. And meanwhile, we're not lending to those banks, we're lending to the central bank. The central bank is responsible for repaying us.
So who got the money?
To financial institutions in Europe and other countries.
Which ones?
I don't know.
$500 billion and you don't know who got the money?
The loan went to the loans go to the central banks, and they then put them out to their institutions to try to bring down short-term interest rates in dollar markets around the world.
Well, let's start with which central banks got the money.
There's 14 of them which are listed in our, I'm sure they're listed in here somewhere.
All right, so who actually made that decision to hand out $1 trillion that way, $500 billion? Who made that decision?
The Federal Open Market Committee.
Okay, and was it done at one time or in a series of meetings?
A series of meetings.
And under what legal authority?
We have a long-standing legal authority to do swaps with other central banks. It's not an emergency authority of any kind.
Anything specific about it?
Do you know my counsel says Section 14 of the Federal Reserve Act.
All right, we actually looked at one of the arrangements, and one of the arrangements is $9 billion for New Zealand. That works out to $3,000 for every single person who lives in New Zealand. Seriously, wouldn't it have been better to extend that kind of credit to Americans rather than New Zealanders?
It's not costing Americans anything. We're getting interest back and it comes back. It's not at the cost of any American credit. We are extending credit to Americans.
Well, wouldn't it necessarily affect the credit markets if you extend $500 billion in credit to anybody?
We are lending to all U.S. financial institutions in exactly the same way.
Well, look at the next page. The very next page has the U.S. dollar nominal exchange rate, which shows a 20% increase in the U.S. dollar nominal exchange rate at exactly the same time that you were handing out $500 billion. Do you think that's a coincidence?
Yes.
All right, well, the Constitution says, no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law.
This money is not drawn from the Treasury.
Well, let's talk about that. Do you think it's consistent with the spirit of that provision in the Constitution for a group like the FMOC to hand out $500 billion to foreigners without any action by this Congress?
Congress approved it in the Federal Reserve Act.
When was that?
Quite a long time ago. I don't know the exact date.
100 years ago?
The original act is 1914, I believe.
I don't know whether this provision was in 1914 or not, but the Federal Reserve Act was in 1913.
All right, and at that time, the entire gross national product of this country was well under $500 billion, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Is it safe to say that nobody in 1913 contemplated that your small little group of people would decide to hand out $500 billion to foreigners?
This particular authority has been used numerous times over the years.
Well, actually, according to the chart on page 28, virtually the entire amount that's reflected in your current balance sheet went out starting in the last quarter of 2007. And before that, going back to the beginning of this chart, the amount of lending was zero to foreigners.
It was zero before the crisis, yeah. This was part of the process, working with other central banks to, again, to try to get dollar money markets working normally in the global economy.
All right, my time is very limited.
The gentleman's time is expired. The gentleman
Thank
from
you,
New York.
Mr. Chairman.
If you take out that $1 bill that's in your wallet or purse and look at the front left side where that dark green circle emblem is at with the letter F in the center, you will read the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a privately owned bank that complies with no laws, no taxes, no audits, no boundaries, and is to never be held accountable for the fraudulent super scheme interest that is enforced upon the masses with the taxes that are deducted from our paychecks. If you are asking yourself, what does this fact have anything to do with the war that's going on right now? Let's just connect the dots in a simple approach here. All forms of currency, whether it be a penny, quarter, or the American dollar, are all created out of thin air. Then the United States government, who is in need of money, comes in and says to the Federal Reserve, we need $6 billion or more. Can you give us this loan? The Federal Reserve comes in and says, sure, no problem, but just make sure to pay us back every penny with the interest that's included. The government agrees on this deal, and then the Federal Reserve makes the money out of thin air, only physically existing in a digital banking system, and then gives the government what's called a bond, which is basically a worthless piece of paper. Consider it to be like an IOU note. Now that the government has this loan, large portions of this money is then distributed to all major corporations, companies, and bank institutions. This is the part where we the people come in. We look for a job, get hired, work the 9 to 5, day after day, with no peace of mind, collect our paycheck, cash it in, and then get whatever's left in the taxes that were incurred and taken out from our restless hard work and life-consuming labor. These taxes have been paid back to the fraudulent companies check after check, then sustained for a period of time until the governments have reached the amount of money to pay back what was loaned by the Federal Reserve, but with interest. Now that you have come to this point, you might want to ask yourself, why are you even paying taxes in the first place? I mean, have you ever honestly asked yourself that question? The answer is simple. To control and limit the annual income of the middle class, enslaving society with the remnants of all the tax dollars that we are forced to pay, while the richest families and bankers in the world sleep in $1,000 bed sheets inside multi-million-dollar mansions, while the rest of humanity is left with the crumbs living inside these compressed compact boxes we call a house. The legality of this problem was not by mere chance or accidental, but by design. The money that is taken out from your paycheck is not for the sake of your well-being, financial contribution to your state, Social Security, or anything for that matter. The biggest scam of corporate America all the way back to the 1900s is the unconstitutional, illegal, and criminal implementation to pay your income taxes. There is absolutely no statute, no rule, no policy, no regulation, no document, and no law in existence whatsoever in the books of anything that requires you to pay taxes for your work and labor.
I really expected that, of course, there's a law that you can point to in the law book, the code, that requires you to file a tax return. Of course there is. Maybe I don't know what it is right then as he was speaking to me, but sure. So naively, I agreed to go off and research it and get back to him. 3.5 months later, I was at that point where I couldn't find the statute that clearly made a person liable, at least not me and most people I know, and I had no choice in my mind except to resign.
There is a substantial, conclusive body of evidence that proves that our income tax system represents the most pernicious form of tyranny. It is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated by government against the working men and women of America.
American citizens, along with the foundation, have been asking the IRS to specifically provide them with the underlying legal foundation upon which they administer and enforce the personal income tax laws in our country.
A lot of people might say, well, gee, if there wasn't an income tax, what would happen to education? They don't understand that education is paid for the most part, out of state and local taxes, your property tax. People might say, well, how are we going to build and maintain our highways if there's no money coming into the government? We need our highways. There is a tax on every gallon of gasoline that people buy. Proceeds from the income tax do not pay for highway construction. The amount of money that we spend on defense is exactly equal to the amount of corporate income tax.
I think we should not want the income tax for several reasons. One is that it is the instrument of totalitarianism. It is the means by which the government can manipulate people.
The federal government itself refuses to provide the American people who are coercively being subjected to this extraction of their private property without any underlying legal justification. There is no law that requires the average American worker in the private sector to pay a direct unapportioned tax on their labor and compensation for services. There is no law.
We, the People Foundation for Constitutional Education, put a full-page ad in the USA Today on July 7th, 2000. Within the body of that ad was a $50,000 challenge for anyone that could show the law. And to me, $50,000 is a lot of money. So I went after that and did the research based on the fact that I thought, let's put this baby to bed. I'm hearing all these rumors, I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I'll answer these people's questions that are asking me, and then I'll win this $50,000. And, based on the research that I did throughout the year 2000 and that I'm still doing, I have not found that law. I've asked Congress, we've asked a lot of people in the IRS commissioners, helpers. They can't answer, because if they answer, the American people are going to know that this whole thing is a fraud.
In addition to that irrefutable fact, you must understand that it is not your fault for not being able to always catch up with your rent, mortgage, bills, car notes, food, clothes, your cost of living, or anything you work hard for just to maintain a decent lifestyle. The purpose of all these things that are superficially commercialized in TV commercials, billboards, and just about everything in advertising is to condition your mind to become a consumer, spend your money, and keep you in debt. That is what this is all about. For society to become a consumer of the most elaborate rip-off credit card companies, charging you interest with every purchase you make, all to intentionally keep you behind your monthly payments, in addition to the outrageous hidden fees that are added, enslaving Americans to always remain trapped into debt forever. This has been the primary goal ever since the monetary system of credit was created. So to further understand this matter in greater detail, one must first come to realize that a bank is not your friend, and I say that on a personal level. Every major bank institution and corporation is all about one thing, and that is profit. At face value, the average person would say that's obvious enough for anyone to see. But if you were to do your own research about things like free energy, such as water and electric running vehicles, solar, tidal, and wind power, just to name a few, you will then come to discover that we have more than enough natural resources and good, honest scientists and engineers to create clean, efficient, infinite energy, whether it be to fuel our own cars or to power our homes without ever having to reach our wallets to pay for it ever again. But the problem is that since this poses a major threat to the wide array of money-hungry corporations, this free energy is not able to generate a dime for the global elites. So it is then banned from the commercial industry, oblivious to the toxic waste in the air we breathe, to eliminate the block of profiting from their corporations. All just to stay on top and make sure that nothing never gets in the way of their cash flow. This reality alone separates what you have taken into account when you take a look back into everything you have learned prior to this point. But now that you have a more in-depth perception and understanding how and why our very own government is deceiving the masses with the intent to enslave society on a global scale, it is now time to unveil the secrecy of treason step by step in order for you to easily comprehend the reason why this has been happening all along.
A post-9/11 plan to improve security rules for driver's licenses. Finally, details were unveiled Friday, and it's going to mean big changes in the way we get and renew our most common form of ID.
One by one, second graders at the Bonita Country Day School flashed their best smiles. Not for school pictures, but for an ID card that hopefully will never get used.
Deadline for Real ID, a requirement that Americans get a more secure driver's license if they want to use it to board planes.
Here's the question. You already provide a photo ID or passport when you travel. So why is the Transportation Security Administration demanding to obtain more private information about you before you can board any commercial airliner in the U.S.? Here are the facts. The TSA, acting in accordance with a congressional mandate, is imposing its so-called Secure Flight Program beginning this weekend. The program will require most people on domestic flights to provide their dates of birth and their gender as a part of this new screening process.
The microchip, the size of a grain of rice, is injected under the skin and gives off a low-frequency radio wave. A scanner reads each chip's identification number. The next step, say researchers, is developing an implantable chip with a global positioning system to track people miles away.
The state has not at least begun the process of implementing this by May 2008. Then the driver's license from that state will no longer be accepted for federal identification purposes. And that's going to be inconvenient for people from that state. Now, many of them may use other IDs. They may use their passport or a federal pass card or some other document. But for those who want to use their driver's license to get on airplanes, they're going to have an incentive to make sure their state at least begins the process of working with us to meet this congressional mandate.
That's a pretty heavy hammer. The government will make it seem as though the airlines and eventually the railroads and soon the toll takers on highways and city bus drivers and gas station attendants as well all want this information. Don't believe it. It is the government that wants this information. You see, the government, the federal government, is on a path to require a national ID card so it can invade our privacy and track our very movements. This is utterly repugnant to that most American of rights. We must stop this before it comes.
For the last several years, Homeland Security has been working desperately on the prime focus of creating an immense variety of identification devices to gather every individual's personal information. In the year of 2006, the U.S. House of Representatives approved legislation with U.S. visit to pass the H.R. 1148 database bill to enforce citizens to comply with the inception of divulging their entire individual identity to Homeland Security. A perfect example to support this fact is the vast majority of kids in schools who have to finger scan themselves just to grab a bite at the cafeteria to adults who are just trying to have a good time at some nightclub. This new method of identification technology was intended to create the illusion of safety and security for you and your children. And although a very low percentage of this may be true, what you need to grasp is that the real purpose for this new approach on the so-called identity protection is to get society comfortable enough to accept this violation of personal information, kind of like in the same way you would care less if you saw someone smoking a cigarette. Now there are 3 steps on how all this is going to plan out. And the first step is biometrics. This technology is now being used in real time. Basically, how biometrics works is that it records all of your physical characteristics, such as the anatomy of your facial structure, fingerprints, the iris of your eyes, to the behavioral characteristics of your voice, the amount of times your eyes blink, to the dialect of how you speak.
Give America a new chance.
Once all of these physical traits are stored inside the biometric system, all of your physical information is then slingshot right back to the Department of Homeland Security. From this point, every individual who has accepted this method of identification is now locked inside a monitor control grid in which records your every transaction, thus inhibiting the right of privacy and personal discretion. This is all being done by the ones in the shadows of key positions and places of authority. So now that you have the basic concept of how this new age of technology is being used against the people, let us further comprehend why this process is being ushered to society in the first place.
The government taking a big new step, looking to build a huge database of people's physical characteristics. It's called biometrics.
And I hope that you're not on that terror watch list.
Yeah, we don't know.
Biometric screening is nothing more than a mirage and stepping stone to bring us into the second step, which is the National ID card. In January 26 of 2005, the H.R. 418 Real ID Act was first proposed to Congress in hopes to pass this bill so that U.S. citizens would be forced to carry a national ID card. After the bill was reviewed by dozens of members from the Homeland Security Committee, in February 10th of 2005, it was then passed by the U.S. House of Representatives. Fortunately, this bill still was not able to pass legislation because it did not receive much of any Senate vote, nor was it assigned from a previous or current president. Now for some, this bill may appear to be very convenient, but what most fail to realize about this situation is the true nature of what this bill is really all about. To put it simply, the National ID card is biometrics on steroids. Let me put it like this. Your driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, fingerprints, iris retina scan, health records, criminal background, credit history, and a small database chip along with every piece of personal information you could possibly imagine is all stored in this one National ID card. Should this PASS ID Act get presidential approval, the very foundation of our individual privacy will become subject of everlasting scrutiny. Do you really think this bill will actually benefit you and your family? Many have protested against this violation of privacy, because at the end of the day, the only ones who truly benefit from this worldly agenda are the same people who brung you 9/11. Among the reality of the driver's licenses, birth certificates, and all other personal documentation will basically become obsolete once this Real ID is implemented upon society, in order to understand this breakdown accurately as to why the first and second step of this matter has come into play, it is to give birth to the most totalitarian third step of them all, which is the very chip. Throughout the progression of these tyrannic bills being fought to pass legislation with tooth and nail, the top global elites have been working alongside with one of the biggest, unpatriotic, corrupted scientific corporations to implant a rice grain-sized microchip tracking device pierced inside the flesh of every man, woman, and child in order to bring forth what this Luciferic empire has been striving to achieve for the last half-century. And that is a microchip-controlled population. This will most likely occur before or after martial law has passed, or when the man-made swine flu pandemic has reached level 6. This microchip will contain your entire existence, from where you live, how much you have left in your bank account, to where you are located on Earth exactly at any given time or place. Every orbiting satellite will transmit your approximate location anywhere on the planet, monitoring all transactions you make under constant surveillance 24 hours a day. It is estimated that roughly more than 26,000 people all across the globe have accepted to take this microchip implant, and is now growing more and more as each day passes, with the mainstream media pushing to fear condition the clueless minds of society with nothing but one oversaturated war clip after another. I cannot stress enough of how crucial it is for you to understand that if you were to take this microchip implant, as much as you might think that it is beneficial to your own safety, the truth is, you won't. For the very moment you inject this implant into your body, every aspect of your entire life will be magnified, watched, and controlled under the lens of their microscope. The apathy of the majority of the American people is in a constant battle to know the real truth, but cannot grasp the bigger picture. When I say this, you should keep in mind that when you combine all three of these steps together, you will then finally come to see the true intention and purpose for what this microchip is really for. Have you ever questioned yourself as to why the American dollar has dramatically decreased in value, or wondered why every single conglomerate corporation has always preferred the American people to purchase or sell anything only through the use of checks, debit, or credit cards, never actually seeing the physical money other than what you may have in your wallet? This design is to adapt into society and to strip man from all physical currency, give rise to those who control in the shadows, and when the time is right, create a cashless society. The beginning stages of this RFID implantation will be first introduced as a voluntary system to where you can choose to take it or not take it at all. But it's just a matter of time before this freedom of choice is no longer an option and will become mandatory by law. The parallels in this case bring us to the two most obvious yet disturbing signs in this situation that prove why this problem was foretold thousands of years ago and how it relates to the modern day consequences we would face should we refuse to comply with our malignant government. How so? For whosoever were to take this microchip and shortly after decide to not conform with the government, after realizing the true nature of this tracker module, will just end up having the Verichip turned off. From this point, every person who embodies this disabled microchip will by law become strictly prohibited to sell or purchase any source of food, clothes, shelter, medical treatment, and I mean anything, simply because your entire identity will no longer remain active in a database system. Now, where do we find the parallels in comparison to this agenda? In the very last book of the New Testament. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in the right hand or in the foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell unless he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Understand that these adamant factors will be put into place while the media instills fear into society, because at the end of it all, the painted future will be for everyone to accept the mark of the beast. Since you still have the narrowest window of opportunity to actually learn this vital information in accordance with the limited amount of truthful, credible sources exposing this knowledge, time is of essence for you to finally understand why you must not believe the countless falsified reasons to accept implanting this microchip into your body. This tyrannic plot is by far probably the most self-deluded, enslaving philosophy that the ruling class elite have adopted. But be that as it may, as surreal this information may appeal, the Illuminati have planned this long before technology ever actually came into existence. And I only use this analogy to simplify how luciferic this agenda has been for the last several centuries. So in turn, after observing all of these documented facts in the greatest scope of detail from all possible vantage points, know this. Whether you are a Democrat, Republican, rich, poor, overweight, skinny, tall, short, or any of those things, understand that love, unity, and freedom has long since always been the primary enemy to obliterate completely. For this has been designed and camouflaged to perpetuate the smokescreen of individual liberty, inevitably inducing the deception of freedom. From creating wars, supporting political parties, to even just purchasing your first home. The most essential method that is used to manifest this abhorrent illusion upon humanity is to not give you rights, but limited privileges restricting freedom of choice in order to control society so that you always remain blind, ignorant, as a prisoner of your own mind without ever realizing it. The hidden hand of Satan has quietly provided the top global elites with the most uncontrollable power, which is to remove all sovereignty from every country, one continent at a time, forming union after union, until all four corners of the world have united as one, in a desperate race to merge and establish a new world order. And then complete what Adam Weishaupt, Adolf Hitler, and George Herbert Walker Bush have all dreamed for the last 300 years. And that is a one-world government.
The very highest degrees of which, combined together, make up a secret order known as the Illuminati. Their goal is to destroy all existing religions save theirs, all existing governments save theirs, and shackle the mob in a system of eternal oppressive debt chained to a computer for the rest of their life, and a propagandized world to make them believe that they are happy in this system. There's a method to their madness. There's really not much method to yours, because you're operating from a place of ignorance, and until you change that, you're going to be bumbling around, bumping into each other, saying and doing the wrong things, not understanding the nature of your enemy. And if you don't understand the nature of your enemy and the weapons they use, you cannot fight that enemy. You can't fight the battle. You shouldn't even be on the battlefield. That's why you're losing the war. And don't tell me you're not, because I'm in a place of great knowledge about who's winning and who's losing this war. And I can assure you, you're losing the war. Doesn't mean it can't be turned around. It'll never be turned around until you learn what you need to know. You don't even recognize half the weapons that they use against you. And some of them seem so insignificant that you don't even try. Do you understand what I'm talking about? What is our common bond truly? Freedom. Freedom. Without freedom, you can't be a Christian no matter what denomination you belong to. You can't be a Buddhist. You can't own a donut shop. You can't drive from here to Oregon. You can't be an American, because that's what it's all about, and it's the only thing that it's all about, nothing else. Nothing else. It's about freedom. Only freedom.